to the law that would ban the app nationwide next month. Right now, the law requires TikTok's China-based parent company, ByteDance, to sell the app to an American company or face a ban. TikTok has tried to challenge the law, saying it violates free speech rights. The High Court will hear the case on January 10th, just 9 days before it's set to be banned on January 19th. They're joining us now is tech journalist Shibani Joshi. Thank you so much for joining us, Shibani.
Hi, Andre.
So here's the thing. So the Supreme Court is going to hear the case on the 10th. They don't often issue rulings right away, and we're talking about just a 9-day difference here. What would happen in the meantime? Do we know yet?
It seems that the TikTok team and the CEO are trying to mount up their allies as best as they can. And we're seeing that evidenced through the TikTok CEO visit to Mar-a-Lago this week, along with a whole host of other tech execs that visited President Trump to share what their point of views are. And what we are seeing and hearing and noticing is that the president is more open and quote unquote has a warm spot for TikTok, which gives all of us reason to believe that this is not necessarily a done deal. Remember that President Trump was in his first administration was the one who originally came up with this idea to ban TikTok. It did not gain any traction. It was President Biden who was able to pass the legislation. But what we're seeing is just more voices at the table and more attempts by TikTok to get its point of view across.
It is interesting here, though, because right now the case is going to be heard on the 10th. The ban is the 19th. The inauguration is the 20th. It'll be the Biden administration that will be arguing the case to ban TikTok. So conceivably, there's going to be either an overlap or the Supreme Court, I guess, could make a decision. I mean, this is kind of a strange time for all of this to be happening, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a strange time, and this is really new territory. I mean, the Supreme Court agreed to hear TikTok's challenge to legislation in a relatively short amount of time. To your point, what you said earlier, they don't normally do things with such an accelerated timeline. The court will hear the argument in January 9th, just ahead of the deadline. And so what we're all waiting for is really the court's opinion on the decision of weighing between two very critical issues. The issue at hand that the Supreme Court needs to decide is whether or not banning TikTok is a violation of First Amendment rights to free speech. What President Biden and earlier President Trump had argued is that TikTok is a threat to national security. So what you're seeing are really huge interests and issues pitting against one another that the Supreme Court is going to start to have to weigh on.
So yeah, that's the part that a lot of people are going to be looking at, because the Biden administration say it's a national security issue because the data collected by TikTok, which TikTok refutes, could go back to the Chinese government. The parent company, ByteDance, located in China. TikTok, for its part, says, hey, the data is kept in servers and the Chinese government doesn't have access to it.
Right.
But that is a fear here. And then TikTok, for its part, is arguing First Amendment. How do they argue First Amendment to the Supreme Court in this case? Do we have a clear picture of that yet?
Well, that seems to be more of a legal matter, but what I think about from a business perspective and a technology perspective, Andre, is how do you split up an algorithm? I mean, how do you practically do this? Because you know, and we know, that the algorithm is based on code, and you can't necessarily divide up code and just take it for the US and then leave code intact for the rest of the world. I don't really know what the solution here is other than a full-scale ban, but even that, Andre, is complicated because there are ways to get around, TikTok not being in an app store. And we've seen this because TikTok was banned in India.
Yep.
So the work around this is to use a virtual private network, a VPN, just change your settings to make it seem like you're in a different country like Canada. And the question remains, if it's banned and you have it downloaded on your phones, how do you take it off? I mean, there's just so much complexity here. And then if they are forced to sell, who can buy it? There's a $20 billion price tag on the company. I mean, there's just a handful of companies out there that can afford it. And do they want partial code just for the U.S. market? I mean, there's just so much here that remains to be determined.
Yeah, the algorithm is pretty much proprietary to that company that built it.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for another company to take it over because you don't know what's all in that code
Right.
if you purchase it, and some of that stuff could be controlled by someone else too. This is an interesting case to watch out. Is this unusual to see something like this at January going to the Supreme Court?
Certainly, the timing is unusual. Right at the cusp of an administration change is just accelerating the pressure as well. And the tech world is watching. I mean, we are in new territory with issues of tech coming to a crossroads around issues of national security. It is something that is part of the reason that big technology CEOs, everyone from the head of Netflix to Apple to Google or Alphabet, were visiting with President Trump because there are just such complex issues at the table. And we even bring in AI, as you know, around this that has economic implications, policy and national security implications, as well as infrastructure implications. And so that's why you're seeing more of this advocacy with CEOs, business leaders, politicians coming to visit Trump, because he is going to be making decisions at a time where AI and the potential is really unfolding, and his decisions can impact where the overall industry and sort of theme is going, and that has direct implications on big tech, employment, performance, etc.
It certainly will. Tech journalist Shibani Joshi, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm sure we'll be talking to you soon and see what happens in just a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Thanks.
All right. Coming up on Morning Shot 2 to 9.